tall, gangly thing?
Hello and welcome. Well, I've finally done it. I've completed the final piece of the Triforce. First, it was Ramkev, then it was Jirachi, and today it's Spicy Appies. Appies, thank you so much for being here. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. So for anyone who may not be super familiar with who you are, why don't we just start by having you talk a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I am a full-time streamer that plays primarily TFT. I'm generally at like the top 10, 20 range, somewhere in there. I'm also one of the hosts of Triforce Tactics, which is a kind of new podcast in the TFT scene. Which, I mean, hopefully you've watched it. If you have not, I big suggest you do because it's pretty fun. And if you like gangly's content, you'll probably like that too because it's kind of along the same vein. But yeah, other than that, I just stream every day. Not that interesting.
So yeah, let's talk, dive in a little deeper on who you are. In particular, I'd like to learn a little bit more about your competitive history. So why don't you just tell me a little bit about tournaments you played in Set 5 or the sets before that as well?
Yeah. So in Set 5, I played in both the Nightbringer Cup and the Dawnbringer Cup. I remember both were patches. I think I did like mediocrely in both, I would say. One of them was the Vayne patch when Vayne 2 was like the new hot shit. Like Vayne 2 was like the best carry in the game. And I just did not want any part of that, so it was like a whole shabakal. But after that, I played in a couple of the Challenger series, like 2 or 3 of those. I have it's a little infamous on my stream that I have a pop-off during my last Challenger series where I got first the last game, which was like what I needed to potentially get through to the next day. And I popped off so hard. It was like, I was hurting for like a week.
Did you make it to the next day?
I didn't. I was 1 point off. Or no, I lost a tiebreaker. Yeah, I lost a tiebreaker, I think. But it felt good to clutch it out. Yeah, it was not my proudest moment. It was up there, but you know what I mean. But Set 4, I played in, I think, a couple open qualifier tournaments. Just not a ton of competing through Set 4. And Set 5, to be honest, I didn't play in a ton of stuff. But and then Set 3 and back. Set 3, I was just kind of learning the game. And then Set 2 and when I did not play. So.
Now, obviously, Set 6 is coming up soon. Are you planning on competing a little bit more than you did in Set 5?
I am, yeah. I am so starved for TFT competition, I feel like. It's been like months and months now of I love doing the podcast stuff and just like, content stuff. But there's something about competition that I'm missing it right now. So I'm planning to enter literally everything possible, whether it be like an official event or just like a side tournament or anything like that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to competition in Set 6.
I mean, in that same vein, you and I are actually we're torn from the same cloth. You and I both come from the Smash scene and are now playing TFT, either competing or making content, whatever. But obviously, in Smash, everything is grassroots, right? You have these gigantic tournaments of thousands of people, all open bracket. Everybody has a chance to play against MKLeo or Mango, whatever game you play, like the best player in that game. However, in Set 5, the open bracket was removed from the tournament structure, the competitive landscape of TFT. So I do want to ask you, coming from that similar background in Smash, do you feel like TFT should have an open bracket, or are you pretty happy with the competitive setup they have right now?
Yeah, so I think, if I'm not misunderstanding here, I think Nightbringer and Dawnbringer did have, it was not an open bracket as in like anyone could join, but like if you were wherever on the ladder, you could sign up, and then if you were high enough, you would join, right? I guess, coming from Smash, there's always this story of like little Jimmy like fighting MKLeo or like Mango round 1, and then like, what if they, it's like their life story that they got to play them round 1, and it's so cool. So I do think there's a lack of that. There's no having like Robin, Milk, Soju, whatever in your tournament lobby when you're, and you're like, oh my god, this is like my hero, my lobby and stuff. But I do think that as far as like the competition goes, aside from that aspect of like meeting these bigger personalities and whatnot, as far as competition goes, the ladder almost acts as like the first qualification of an open bracket, if that makes sense. As in, like if you, like anyone can play the ladder and anyone can climb the ladder, and if like that's like the first step to the tournament, I guess. So like ladder is the open part of the bracket, and then if you get to a certain part, then you get to like round 2 pools, for example, right? Like round 1 pools is just the ladder, and then round 2 pools is the first round of bracket once like all the players are picked from the upper parts of the ladder. So
yeah, I think that's a fair argument. I think, in a game like TFT where obviously there is an element of variance, I've heard a lot of people say that to them it's important that the qualification process for the tournaments set up the tournament to only be full of top level players. And I think that's a fair opinion.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, Set 6, it's on PBE right now. We've all gotten to play it for about a week or so. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on Set 6 so far.
Yeah, I am having a blast. I've been shooting PvE nonstop, playing as much as I can. I think Set 6, I mean, it's probably the most fun I've ever had on a PBE. And, PBE, I have never been like the biggest, slam billion PBE games and figure out the game PBE, whatever. I generally don't get super into it because there's part of like playing on a ladder and like having a little more stakes behind the game that makes it like really addictive for me. So PBE doesn't have that. So it kind of like, maybe loses some of its shine. But Set 6, even on PBE, has not been having that at all for me. It's so fun. I just want to play more and more and more. It's like I stick my hand in a bag of potato chips, and like Set 6 is just augments with a potato chip, and I just keep on eating. And it's like a different flavor every time, which is perfect. So,
how do you feel the Hextech Augment compares to set mechanics of the past?
I think it's the most flexible from like a balance perspective. I would say maybe kind of along the lines of like a Galaxy. I'm not, a game designer. I'm not great at that. So, no Morts or Kens can get on my case about not knowing anything. Because I'll admit I don't know anything. Sure. But it seems like it's much more open to being balanced more consistently. Something like shadow items, I think, for example, or let's say Chosen. I think it's very hard to not change like the entire game without changing those. You change like, you have to make little adjustments, but you can't like change the full personality of something like that very easily. Like a shadow item or like a champion. But something along the lines of an augment, I think it is much easier to just say, hey, this augment doesn't work, we'll take it out. I think Static actually said they weren't planning to do stuff like that, at least the first half of the set, but it is the possibility is there, which I think is really cool. And I do think that it's also just a lot more. It creates a lot more decisions than a lot of other mechanics have. Like even something like Chosen, I feel like augments create so many more decisions than like a mechanic like Chosen or shadow items or anything like that, that it increases the skill cap of the game while also making it really fun for casual players and not confusing, like having to memorize a bunch of shadow item effects. So it's like the perfect mix.
Yeah, I know they said the goal of the Hextech Augment was really to make it feel like every single game, feels different. And that's something I think we've heard the developers say for every single set, whatever they're introducing is to make it feel like you never play the same game twice. Do you feel, obviously it's early, it's only been a week, but from what you've seen based on the games you've played and from other games that you've watched other streamers play, do you feel like there is going to be a bit more replayability in this set? Oh,
for sure. I distinctly remember like a set of like 3 or 4 games in a row I played. I was playing in a lobby with like Ramkev, Esports Law, like Cardax, Alex M, these really good players. And just like game to game to game, every single one, I was trying hard. I was playing against great players, so it's not like there was any, skill discrepancy. Not like a great amount of skill discrepancy or anything. And every single game felt so different. Like one game, I started out with hyper roll. I'm below 10 every single round, like pushing levels, and like I'm playing a whole different game than like Bryce who's re-rolling Yordles or something, or Kevin who's like saying me mercenaries, fuck it. Like, and then the next game, I remember taking the augment that it's that augment that makes it so that if a unit has no synergies, it gets like extra attack speed and health.
Oh yeah.
And it became the sweatiest, dizziest game of my life, like trying to figure out how to balance not having any.
Did it work out?
So that game itself didn't work out, but the theory behind, I got a lot of theory from it, right? My personal, this is on the down low. No one steal the tech, but you only carry Fiora or Kaisa with that, and you don't care about it, I don't think, until you get that Fiora or Kaisa for the most part, because you just don't run Challenger. Or Mutant if you're playing Kaisa, or you're on Enforcer or whatever, and then you just play stuff like Clockwork, like Socialite, stuff that gives like synergies to the Fiora or the Kaisa, because I think it's 60% bonus attack speed and like some HP, so it's actually as good as Challenger 2 is after a kill, because after you get a kill, you get a bonus attack speed as a Challenger.
So you just play one augment down up to that point in time, though, right?
Kind of. If you just have like a random 2-star unit that's pretty strong, you can just toss it in, right, with no synergies,
sure, yeah.
But you don't force it for sure, because I was playing like my board most of the game was like 2 to 3 Socialite and nothing else, and it felt terrible. It felt so bad.
It's amazing.
I think You definitely, synergies are important. I like to think of it as like a straight vertical that you just have to balance like how worth it is to have it in. But like stuff like that, like stuff like that is a 100 game where you can make a strategy like that work. But it's very unique, and it's something that like there are all kinds of situations like that pop up with augments. So just one example of many cool situations you can cool pickles you can get yourself stuck in.
Yeah. I know, like, for a lot of people, Galaxy is almost like the test drive for what Hextech Augment was going to be, right? But except the difference is, you kind of said it in your answer before, like you're building the rules of your game. And the fact that you actually have the choices, I think makes it feel much better to a lot of players than what Galaxies did, where you're kind of trapped in this game with this rules that you may not necessarily want to play in. Now let's move on from set 6, because what I want to talk about is Triforce Tactics. I just started listening to your podcast, and I got to say, I really, really love it. You guys are amazing. If anyone has not checked it out, I'm going to have the link in the description, so make sure you guys subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever, and listen to it. But let's kind of hear the origin story of Triforce Tactics. How did this come about, and how did you guys all actually get this together to make it happen?
Yeah, so it's not a particularly exciting origin story, I would say. So Drachi and I were in a call one day. I think I had like given out like free coaching sessions on a 30-dinner subathon I had done, and Drachi got one of those, but they're a great player. So we were trying to think of what something we should do, and so we decided to just like stay in a call and play a game together. I think it was on stream too, and it definitely was actually, because partway through the game, someone in chat, at Matiti Maso on Twitch, because he likes the shoutouts for this, because he basically made the podcast happen. He was like, wow, this should be a podcast. And we were like, oh my God, this totally should be a podcast. And then we were trying to think of a third person to get into it, like whose personality would mesh really well with ours. And so the first person we thought of, both of us, I think, was Kevin, Remkev. And then we reached out, and he was like, hell yeah, I'm down. And then, from there, it's a Cinderella story, I guess. So...
people talk about like the content in the YouTube or in the TFT scene being kind of narrow. You have like your highlights of like, I got 3-star, 5 cost, right? Then you have your guides. And then outside of that, there's not really a lot of content, especially not like a lot of narrative content. So what I'd love to hear you do is actually talk a little bit about what the podcast is, what you guys are trying to do with it, and then even maybe a bit of like, how does your podcast fill this gap in the TFT scene?
Yeah, of course. So our podcast, originally the thought behind it was to create this, to kind of fill this niche of having, these high level players talk at a more like personal level, or just one to have high level players interact. So I think TFT is a very isolated game, like content wise as well. It's all about like one player's content, one player's interactions with like the game, generally not interpersonal relationships or like situations with other players or other personalities in the scene, which I think was one of the things we sought to tackle. So that's why we have a lot of crazy guests. We've had people from like Robin, we've had Inigo, we've had commentators like Bryce. We're hoping to get some quick spoiler. We're hoping to get a game dev on eventually.
Okay.
Not disclose who that is, but hopefully it's going to happen. So just to kind of give a voice to these people who potentially may or may not be super well known in the scene, but also to have a kind of shooting the shit kind of style, give more personality to players, kind of see who's behind the game, and also just show this like interaction between players that I think is really fun to watch. And TFT, just because it's a free-for-all game, does not really support very well in the forms of content that were out there right now, like highlight clips and like game clips.
Yeah, and even just like a kind of a quick aside for the people who do watch my videos, something I will say kind of in favor of the podcast is the interviews that I put together typically are maybe a little more sterile. They're a little more structured. I send the questions to the guests. They have an idea of what they want to say. If you do really want to hear kind of this just like shooting the breeze off the cuff style conversation, I really do recommend the podcast. It's a great listen. I've had a lot of fun listening. Even the people that I've talked to in my videos, like Bryce Blum, for instance, hearing him in this style versus hearing him on the podcast, you get a totally different experience. Highly recommend it. All right, that's my pitch for your podcast. Yeah. But let's move on again. So recently, I know you got partnered on Twitch. So let's kind of talk about long-term plans. Are you planning on yeah, congratulations, by the way. Are you planning on streaming full-time or continuing to stream full-time? Do you kind of expect like a long maybe career path in streaming or TFT?
Yeah, so I started streaming as quarantine, not as quarantine started. I started playing TFT as quarantine started. I just graduated college. I can't speak. So kind of hard to just like find a job randomly right out of college. So I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I started playing TFT, and then I thought, I feel like I want to like stream this and like interact with people, like try to do some educational stuff like that. And so about a year ago now, it's actually a lot of 12-month resubs actually just started rolling in. So it's been about a year since I started streaming.
Wow. Nice.
And I kind of fell in love with it over the course of it. Just like the content creation aspect of it, the, talking to chat, like educating people, but also just like shooting the shit and being an idiot on stream. All of it kind of just like really, really vibed with me. And I think I've really like found what I want to do in streaming. I would like to do it as long as possible. I think the stream's been growing a ton. Getting partnered was huge. It was a very trying year at times to get there. There were a lot of people that put a lot of effort in beyond myself. Shout out to Mateo, who's one of my mods who handles like basically everything production wise on the stream. Shout out to anyone in the community who's been helping me for a year now. But I think it's only up from here. So I'd like to keep doing it, is I guess the short way to put it. So I plan to keep streaming, and hopefully it will work out like that.
Yeah, likewise. I hope to see the stream continue to grow and be successful. Now, we've got a new section. We introduced it in the last interview for the first time, which is our Twitter questions. If you guys don't already know, if you follow me on Twitter, I'm going to announce who the next guest is. You guys can post your questions and have a chance to have them on this or in the next video. So, first Twitter question comes from TFT caster extraordinaire Bryce Blum, Esports Law, who says, "What will it take for you to reach the next level? As a clear up-and-comer, how do you approach becoming elite?"
Yeah. So this is something that, kind of obvious, I guess I've been giving a lot of thought to. I've been really craving competition again, and Set 6 is right on the corner, and I really want to kind of carve my own little spot in TFT history this set. So I think it's very different. There's a large group of people who are, I think, right on the cusp of becoming like, tippy top. And I think it's very different for each of those players, what they need to focus on to get there. And so myself, I think it takes a lot of like introspection and just a lot of like, self-analysis, like kind of objective self-analysis, which is difficult, obviously. Yeah. But something I think I've found myself that I want to, that's my biggest weakness, that I want to be shoring up as soon as possible as Set 6 goes live, and why I think I'm going to be in a lot of different types of streams that aren't just like kind of gung-ho, play ladder for fun kind of deal. I know probably no drunk streams on the ladder. Is concentration. I think concentration has been something that's been holding me back for a long time now, and that, in tournament settings and in ladder settings, everything, I miss a lot of like little things, make a lot of little mistakes that, people like Ram Kev or like Robin, Ramblin, etc. don't make because they're very focused. And I just like, I'm like a fucking squirrel. I like see a nut and I just run off. And so, one of the biggest things for me this set is going to be focusing on staying very concentrated on the game, making sure I'm looking at everything, making as many decisions as possible, and just being aware of the game in general, I'd say.
The next question comes from @Zebum, who says, "Which top players do you think will benefit the most from the new set mechanic in competitive play, and are there any that you think will be affected negatively?"
Yeah, I think the new set mechanic is gonna right off the bat, it feels very punishing to players that want to force only like one or two comps, I would say. I don't think I can really name any names as to who's going to be punished, because I think a lot of people can change their style on a dime if they want. So, someone like Milk who can go Pledge 2020 and at Worlds can very easily just play flexibly. So I think players who really find their niche in that I'm going to play 2 or 3 comps super well kind of style are going to struggle a bit. I do think players that, I think there are 2 kind of players that will benefit a lot. One of them is the kind of player that just puts in a ton of hours and knows, there's so many more outs in this set, so many more lines to take. Someone who can just be familiar with all of those. And then the other one is the person who just understands the game to such a degree that they don't need to play the line as much they can play a lot more of these like theoretical lines, I guess, where like, you know, the 1 in 1,000 game, like you can navigate it consistently because you understand what's strong, you understand what's doing well. Which those players are generally kind of the same player anyways, but I think
Yeah, it makes sense. I know I've heard people throwing around names like Grand Vice and like Noob Owl, these players who just like every time you look at their board, it's always a different board than the last time you looked. And it's just like they're constantly making their board slightly different to try and optimize, you know, their game plan. So I totally agree. Moving on with the last question. This comes from, I feel like, the mother of TFT. She's the mod of everybody's Twitch channel and Discord. It's Kana at Lauren Wu, who says, how does one learn while playing TFT? As a lower skilled player, I find it difficult because I don't even realize what mistakes I'm making, much less how to fix them.
Yeah, I think I'll big shout out to Kana. He's been doing a ton of my chat recently as well. Yeah, the true mother of TFT. I think the biggest thing to look at to get better at TFT is until you get to, you know, the challenger range, top 10, 20 range, like if you're bot 4ing, it's not on the game, it's on you. So you have to be willing to say that, like, one, look at what parts of the game you consider RNG, and what parts of the game you consider to be doomed because of like variance. And you look at that and say, how could I affect that more meaningfully? Something that I touch on a lot in coaching is that you need to be constantly aware of how many decisions you're skipping in a game to get better. So if you are, let's say, not scouting stage 2, you're not seeing that someone's contesting a comp you potentially want to play, you're not, you know, trying, or let's say you're not positioning later on. You know, all this stuff is decision making that if you don't scout, if you don't take in all this information and be aware that you have the ability to make a decision here, you're skipping that decision and you make it a 50-50. So you're adding variance where there could be less variance. You are adding variance by not making a decision. So finding as many decisions as possible and then consciously making a decision in all the situations is one of the biggest things. So just be aware that most of TFT, while there is a lot of variance, it's all very easy to, not easy, but very manageable to play around, and that, you know, until you get to these very high echelons of the ladder, you will not be bot 4 in a game unless you are impacting that variance negatively, I guess. So.
Awesome. Well, we just suckered you out of a free coaching session on this video. Appreciate that. But Appies, that's all the questions I had for you. Again, thank you so much for coming on. Before we go, is there anything that you'd want to shout out?
Yeah, for sure. Shout out to, you know, the stream community, everyone who's been helping this year-long journey be as amazing as it has been. Shout out to my family and my girlfriend for being very supportive of what I do. Shout out to Gangly for inviting me, and also anyone who watches the podcast, be sure to watch Gangly's content because we were like two sides of the same awesome fucking coin. So if you want, you know, I think if you enjoy one kind of content, you'll enjoy the other. So yeah, I think that's about it.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on here. And for everyone watching, thank you guys for watching all the way through this video. If you guys want to have your questions featured in the next interview, make sure to follow me on Twitter so you can see who's coming on. You can send me your question there. And if it's good, I may put it into the next video. But for more TFT coverage and content, make sure you guys like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.